Imagine for a moment taking your car for a regular service, and instead of regular mechanics doing the work on the car, a Super GT pit crew is put in charge of your service. Well, if you visit a branch of the Saitama Toyopet network in Japan, a Toyota specialist, then that's exactly what might well happen. This is the story of the Toyota Mk X GT300 Super GT car. The Toyota Mk X is not at all well known outside of Japan. It's a fairly standard looking saloon car produced between 2004 and 2019. It was originally built as a rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive high-end alternative to the Camry in Japan, and for much of its life it was only available at Toyopet dealers in that country. In 2012, one of those dealership chains in Saitama Prefecture wanted to find a new way to ensure that its customers could enjoy the Toyota GT86. It came up with a novel idea, a novel philosophy if you like, and that philosophy went a bit like this. If car sellers don't know how to enjoy cars, then they won't be able to tell customers how to enjoy cars. And as part of this new philosophy, Saitama Toyopet set up a motorsports department, which it called Greenbrave. This new racing team would be entirely staffed by employees of the company. The mechanics running the cars at the racetrack at weekends would be the same mechanics working on customers' road cars in the week. Even the managing director of the company got involved, and he would be one of the team's drivers. The team started racing in various series, including Super Taikyu and a one-make GT86 Cup. But what the team really wanted to do was race in Japan's top championship, Super GT. Saitama Toyopet senior managing director Takayuki Hiranuma wasn't certain about how to do this. Racing a Lexus GT3 car would be an easy option, but that wouldn't do anything to highlight the technical skill of the company staff. Developing a JAF GT300 rules car would be possible, but it would be a lot more expensive. However, when the mother chassis rules were introduced, he saw an opportunity. The Super GT mother chassis rules allow for teams to buy a kit of parts to build a car around, with a dome carbon fibre chassis at its core, along with an unbranded Nissan VK45DE 4.5 litre normally aspirated V8 engine. The transmission and some suspension parts were also included in the package, but teams still had to develop the rest of the car around those parts. Dome had already developed two variants of the Toyota GT86 to the mother chassis rules, so there'd be no point in Saitama Toyopet developing yet another version of that car. So instead, they opted to use the Toyota Mk X as a basis. It wasn't an obvious choice. As a saloon car, the Mk X would be the first four-door car to race in GT300 since the Subaru B4 legacy, and this resulted in the car having quite an extreme look. While the GT300 GT86 has a longer wheelbase than the production car, the layout of the mother chassis parts package meant that the Mk X would have to have an identical wheelbase to the Dome GT86, which was actually shorter than the production car was, making the rear end on the Mk X GT300 look a bit different. The suspension layout of the Mk X was of course identical to that used in the GT86 mother chassis car, with pushrod, actuated spring and damper units all round. At the front of the car, these were mounted alongside the cylinder heads of that Nissan or GTA V8 engine, while at the rear they were mounted on top of the Hewland LLS transmission casing. Realising correctly that it didn't have all of the required skills in-house to develop the new bodywork, Saitama Toyopet called in Mooncraft to help develop it. Mooncraft, of course, had already developed its own mother chassis car, the Lotus Evora, but as a mid-engine car, little of that project could be adapted to the Mk X. Being a dealer rather than a manufacturer also presented some challenges in the car's development. Detailed CAD drawings and drawings of the production car bodywork were unavailable, so the Mk X mother chassis car was designed using a mould taken from the original production car's bodywork. The bodywork on the Mk X production car then had to be adapted to essentially fit onto the mother chassis package, which was developed around the Dome GT86 design. And this meant that the Mk X bodywork shape had to be reduced in height dramatically, to the point where the main cooling duct on the nose of the car was reduced in size massively, and this raised some concerns about cooling. The roofline is the same height on the Dome MC86 and the Mk X mother chassis cars, even though know the production Mk X is much taller than the production 86. That's how dramatic the bodywork changes on the Mk X were. And this all resulted, as I say, in a rather wild looking car, a little bit reminiscent, I think, of the B4 Legacy. And while the Mk X mother chassis had a larger frontal area than the Dome MC86, work done by Mooncraft ensured that it wasn't much more draggy than the 86. Through its life, there were extensive changes to the Mk X GT300 bodywork. Note the design of the two vents on the bonnet of the car at its launch at the Tokyo Auto Salon in 2017. Later in the season, that ducting was revised with additional elements around the leading edge and sides. You can see them painted white in this picture. At other tracks, a larger, more aggressive version of these inserts was used. And finally, another variant of those inserts was used with a lip around the upper edge. This area of development continued into 2018, when a separating element was placed in each main duct. And at some races, the lipped insert seen in 2017 was also mounted on top of them. Finally, in 2019, additional cooling louvres were mounted to the bonnet behind those larger ducts. The front corner of the car is of interest. At the launch, it was fitted with a large single front dive plane, but it was later seen with a revised, smaller design of single dive plane, as well as at some tracks, twin dive planes. And at Fuji Speedway, no dive planes at all, as the car was trimmed out for minimum drag. This shot's quite interesting. Note the mesh inside the front wheel arch and the exhaust location, but also the design of the mirror support. This was another key area of development for the team. A slimmed down version of that twin support you saw was tried at one point, and then the slightly more chunky version was used at other tracks like Fuji Speedway, seen here in 2018. And in 2019, the support was revised again, with a single support being used for most of the season. On the side of the car, the team had a couple of designs that alternated between depending on the track's demands. On lower drag tracks, the car tended to use a solid panel along the base of the car, but at hotter races, a revised version was used which slanted inwards and opened up a second cooling slot ahead of the rear wheel. At some races, the car featured these two dimples on the rear bodywork. I'm not really sure of their function. One issue with the mother chassis being used with the four-door Mk X was that it was really optimised around a small two-seat sports car, and that meant that the doors on the Mk X were located a bit too far forwards, or that the chassis was a bit too far rearwards. You can see that in this image where the steering wheel is mounted almost in the middle of the door, and that's not ideal for driver changes, as the driver almost sat behind the pillar at the rear of the door. If you compare this with the GT86, you can see that the wheel is much closer to the front of the door, and it opens up to let the driver in and out quite easily. The car made its race debut in the opening round of the 2017 Super GT season, but that debut wasn't exactly all to plan. In fact, the car failed to score any Drivers' Championship points all year, and there were some more mishaps. But it's easy to forget that this team was not made up of professional racing crew, but rather mechanics and staff from a chain of Toyota dealers. In 2018, for the first time, the car scored some points with a single top 10 finish, good enough for 19th in the championship. 2019 would already be the last season for the Mk X in Super GT. The mother chassis cars by then were struggling to remain competitive, and anyway, the Mk X production car that it was based on, well, that was going out of production at the end of the year. Despite that, there was no drop in enthusiasm from the team. Indeed, the car performance was greatly improved, with a podium finish at the first race, and then a runner-up finish at Autopolis, nearly a race win. A third top 10 finish in the season was good enough to secure 9th in the championship, and that's really not bad for a team from a local Toyota dealer. The Mk X then retired on something of a high, but the Greenbrave team was not done. It would remain in Super GT with something quite different, but we'll have to get back to that. If you've enjoyed this very green and brave tale of saloon car racing and a GT championship, then don't forget to hit like and subscribe, as there's much more like this to come. For now though, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon, somewhere in the pit lane.